Hello, good evening, everybody. I am so excited to be speaking with you tonight about The Boy with a Bird in His Chest by Emme Lund. Before I bring the woman of the hour on screen, as well as her incredible conversation partner, Nina LaCour, I'm going to tell you a little bit about The Novel Neighbor. The Novel Neighbor is a local, independently operated bookstore in St. Louis, Missouri. We do all different kinds of books, all different kinds of genres, and carefully curated gifts as well. And this is also one of our favorite things, to host events. So if you are ever looking for a bookish thing to do, go to thenovelneighbor.com/events. There's always a fun new thing to pick up. And tonight we're going to be talking about one of my favorites. First up, I will introduce Nina LaCour, who is our conversation partner. Nina LaCour is the best-selling and Michael L. Prince Award-winning author of picture books, young adult novels, adult literary fiction. Her novel, We Are Okay, was named one of Time Magazine's top 100 YA novels of all time. Her adult literary debut, Yerba Buena, was a Book of the Month selection, a Target Book Club selection, and an Indie Next pick. It garnered stars reviews from Kirkus, Publishers Weekly, Bookpage, Booklist, and others. Nina's books have also been translated into over a dozen languages. We are so excited to have Nina here tonight, and thank you so much, Nina, for joining. And then finally, Emme Lund is an author living and writing in Portland, Oregon. She is an MFA from Mills College. Her work has appeared in Electric Literature, Time Magazine, The Rumpus, Romper, and Portland Mercury, and Autostraddle, among many other venues. In 2016, Quiet Lightning Books published a limited run of her book, The Sacred Text of Rosa, Who Was a Great, complete with art by Stella Peach, about which Andrew Sean Greer wrote, "I have been looking for this book for years, against every modern trend, a brilliant, old world, handmade piece of magic." In 2019, she was awarded an Oregon Literary Arts Fellowship in Fiction. She is represented by Layla Kempoli at Stone Song. The Boy with a Bird in His Chest is her first novel, and it is just now out in paperback. Look at how beautiful it is. I'm going to bring on Nina, and I'm going to bring on Em. Hi, guys.
Hi.
All right. I'm going to turn it over to you, Em, for a reading, and then for you and Nina to ask wonderful questions. If you are watching this and you have a question, please put them in the comments. We'll be doing a Q&A at the end of tonight's event. And I will see you all towards the end of the hour. I'll talk to you in a bit.
Thanks, Cassie. All right. Yay. Hi, Nina.
Hello,
Hi. Hi, whoever's out there. I'm going to read a little bit, and then, yeah, we'll talk about it.
Wonderful. I can't wait.
Lovely. I'll just start at the beginning, because it's fun.
Yeah.
The Java sparrow lives inside of Owen's chest. His heart is pushed down so that it sits above his belly, and his left lung is shoved against his sternum. Between the two organs, his skin is pulled back, and inside the hole is a bird named Gale. She has been there since he was born. She'll die when he dies. 3 ribs stick out from his skin, swim in the open air, and then sink back beneath the skin on his left side. The bones are a dull gray, and the space where the skin meets bone feels natural, like the webbing between fingers or toes. Owen has 1 week left to live. He is going to California, where he will walk off the side of the Golden Gate Bridge. He is 17, and many will assume he is being dramatic, but he is simply being a realist. He has felt a strong pull to deep water ever since his birth, and he is simply giving in. He knows his story ends in the water. His body will remain in the bay, resting among the mermaids under the sea. The bus groans and pulls over at the top of the Robb Hill, the base of the Coyote. There's no sidewalk here, only gravel and the sienna dust that covers everything in Montana. He kicks dirt and gravel onto the grass of someone's yard and sets his bag on the ground. A left rib creaks from an injury that never quite healed right. His knuckles are swollen and bruised, and he fingers the cuts. Gale runs her beak along his spine. The wind blows a warm breeze, and Owen turns to face the town. He stands with his back to the west, makes sure no one is looking, and lifts up his tank top. There it is. The space with no skin, just ribs, and the small bird who lives inside his chest. Most of her feathers are light gray. She wears white feathers below her eyes like a mask, and deep black feathers on the top of her head like a bad toupee. He and Gale look out over the valley one last time. The Rockies sweep across the landscape, and it seems as though the town is molded into the side of the Coyote, couched in its soft hills. A mild gray film covers the valley like smoke, and Owen is not sure if it's always been this gray or if his color blindness is getting worse. Morning Montana has always been that gray. He pulls his shirt back down, picks up his bag, and crosses the street. Beyond the street is a small ditch overgrown with grass, and past that is I-90, his ticket west. The long grass brushes against his elbows, and Gail squawks beneath his t-shirt. Are you going to do the classic right thumb out, walking backwards, or the walk forward but turn every time you hear a car? I think eye contact is key here. You want the driver to see you. Gail's words tickle the tops of his ribs. Owen slides down the small bank. Walking backwards will take us twice as long, he says, dripping the words down his throat to her. I think it's better to just face forward and hold my thumb out. Hope someone picks us up. Rocks slide down the other side of the ditch, and his boots dig into the dust. He stands at the side of the railing. It is only briefly, but for a moment Owen considers those he is leaving behind. His mother, Tennessee, the boy. Owen, you don't have to go, Gail says. She's reminded him 1,000 times he doesn't have to go if he doesn't want to. I do. He climbs over the steel rail and onto the side of the 2-lane highway. Just be careful. Trust that gut of yours. Gail's thinking about serial killers again. Cars race by. None of them are even close to slowing down. You're my gut, he says, and he sticks his left thumb out and walks towards exit 82 out west.
So beautiful.
Thank you.
I love returning to the beginning again after finishing the book and loving it so much and following Owen's whole journey. It's such a gorgeous book. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, such a beautiful debut. I thought maybe we could start by talking about what it's been like for you, because the book came out, last year. So you've had all this time to sit with it and to, go through everything that comes with publishing a debut novel. And I'm curious to know what it's been like for you, and, just tell us a little bit about that process and what this first year of having your novel out in the world has been like for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's, as I'm sure maybe you remember, really wild. I think I had a lot of expectations or things I thought would happen. I thought it would go a certain way, and in many ways those things came true. And also I was completely, surprised and astonished. Especially I don't know, I never knew what to expect with a novel, especially I worked on this one for 7 years before we went to submit it, my agent and I, and it's just I didn't know who would like it, if anyone, and if it would sell any copies, and it has, and it's been really just a really, really sweet experience, especially, readers reach out to me pretty frequently and message me, email me, and tell me how much the book has meant to them. And it's, the best feeling in the whole world. And then also it's, I have a lot of insecurities and anxieties. And I think in many ways, I always, and also I have no idea how the book actually is doing. I think there's this sort of, I don't know, you get like royalty statements or whatever, but those numbers don't necessarily mean anything to me. And, I'm like, is that good? Is that bad? I don't know. And so it's just a really, really mixed bag. It's really beautiful and lovely to hear the response from readers and to know that I wrote something that means something to them, and to see the critical response it's received, and to know there are so many people, both professionally and personally, who really appreciate it. And then also it's like filleting your skin and wearing it on the outside, and taking this thing that you put everything into for such a long time, and then sharing it with others.
Yeah.
It's just really nerve-wracking. It's a lot, but it's been a beautiful experience. And I sort of, I'm into the next book now. I'm finishing up a draft of another book. And so this one has sort of, this last week has been really lovely because I get to revisit it. And I've gotten to talk a lot about it again, which I haven't talked about it in a second. I mean, it's not been that long, but it's been a second, and it's nice to revisit it.
Yeah. Yeah, I find it so wild to go through the kind of frenzy of the initial publication process. And then like kind of, I feel like a couple months go by, then I'm like, oh, it's quiet. Like, and it's fascinating. And then it begins all over again.
Yep.
Yeah. So let's see. We could start with the setting of the novel. I found the settings to be really beautiful and just kind of fascinating. I've always been very interested in Montana, so I was curious, why you chose Montana. Like, I have associations with it, and I'm just curious to know, what your process was like for that. But then also just the Pacific Northwest, like I felt like the beauty of the forests and that kind of that like wet forest lush feeling, and so I'm curious to know about your settings. And I know you live in Portland, I believe, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So how much of this is from your own life in terms of the settings?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of it. My wife is from Montana, and we visit frequently. I mean, we just go back a couple times a year. They're from Missoula, and it's set in a fictional town in Montana. It's not a real Morning. Montana doesn't exist.
Such a beautiful name for a town.
Thank you. I think that I mean, it's just like such a beautiful place and really lovely. And I think also, I think that there's sort of a notion that a lot of mountain towns will have, especially mountain towns that are considered liberal for like the area around them, which I think Missoula definitely does, where there's this sort of false sense of safety and security for queer people, for people of color, I can imagine, or marginalized folks, where it's like, oh, well, like it's not like the rest of Montana, or it's not like, for Boise, the rest of Idaho, or whatever. And I think that one of the things I was really interested in was how Janice would feel about her son, about needing to protect him. And I think, there's a point that's like, she's really nervous because she's in Montana, and she's really nervous about how people in Montana will perceive a boy with a bird in his chest. And it seemed like a really good setting for that. Yeah. I also just like, I had been visiting Montana a lot, and early on I had started a draft of this other story about a character that ended up becoming Clyde. But he was very, it came from this prompt in my MFA where an instructor had asked us to write a short piece with a character who sort of embodied a place. Oh. And so I wrote about this like sensitive gay cowboy who was like riding his horse, and he was interviewed by this reporter, and it was a very silly piece that never went anywhere other than, it sort of became the basis for Clyde for this book. And then I spent my summers in Puget Sound, Washington. I grew up here in Portland, and my grandfather has a house there on the Sound, and I'd go and visit in the summers. And it was always, I don't know, I was the kid who stood next to the water and just stared at it for hours. And it made sense to me that that's where he would find his comfort and his ease.
Yeah. Oh, I feel like my brain is going in so many different directions because your answer relates to so many different facets of the book that I want to talk about. But maybe I'll go back to Janice because you mentioned her and the fear that she felt, having this son with this, with a bird in his chest. It's funny. I'm trying to think of a way to describe something that's very clear. And so it made me think so much about protection, both the protection that, as a parent, Janice felt the responsibility to provide for Owen, but then also the self-protection that Owen ultimately, wrestles with a little bit more on his own as the novel progresses. And just just this, how incredibly vital it is for people to protect themselves, but also how harmful that can be and how it can make us hide parts of ourselves and not show the world who we are, and therefore we deal with all of the fallout from not being able to live authentically, if that's to use the common language. So I'm curious, in for you, what do you think of Janice's choices? What do you think of Owen's own choices? I guess from whatever vantage point you want to do that, maybe from the authorial vantage point, how did you walk the line between it's on one hand, Janice is completely right in protecting Owen. On the other hand, what she has come up for him is not sustainable and is also not a way for a person to live a life in the world. So I guess take my jumble of thoughts and make of it what you will.
Happy to. Yeah. I think in the end, this sort of really became the burning question that I wanted to address in the book. Especially as, right from the beginning, the thing that kept coming up is this notion of Owen keeping this bird a secret, because if he's found out, he's put in danger, and then how that does ultimately harm him. And I think it was really writing this book was for me this sort of investigation of this notion of how do we stay safe in a world where maybe it's not safe for us to entirely be ourselves 100% of the time, while also living life. And also, as we know through history that the only way that we are able to gain rights and the only way that we are able to pave a path so that others may live safely behind us is by living authentically as ourselves out in the open. And so I really wanted to try to tackle that and try to address that as best I could. It's complicated. It's really complicated. That's sort of where I landed at the end, was shit if I know. I think, I get what Janice is doing by hiding him away for those first 15 years, but also, like you said, that's no way to live. And I think we do it as adults even. I see queer and trans people do it all the time, where they just don't feel like they can be safe out in the world, and so they hide away. And actually, I think that some of us, with good reason, end up hiding away entirely 100% of the time. And so really, the book was, I really wanted to kind of wrestle with that and sort of kind of lean towards this notion that okay, maybe Owen shouldn't go to a party and announce that he has a bird living in his chest.
Right.
But he can have a group of friends who understand that. And, once he starts announcing it, you do start to, maybe hear that others have this, I don't want to say affliction, but have this anomaly too. And I think that's really that's the seed of the book. That's the whole point, is I get why individuals hide away and keep themselves closed off. But I think in the end, I want people reading this book to maybe see the notion that they don't have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Of course we need to stay safe, but
Yeah.
also like if you're trans or you're queer, there are literally queer and trans people everywhere
Yeah.
living
Yeah.
out in the open, you
Yeah.
know? And so I think maybe fuck with that notion a little bit. Maybe push against it and live as yourself and see what that feels like. And
Yeah.
also do it in a way that feels safe. Find a way that feels safe. You know, we do it little by little, and you know, where you are matters, and who's in your community matters.
Mhm.
But if you don't have other queer and trans people in your community, you should fix that. You should find some. They're out there. We're literally in every city, in every small town, in every state. And I know it feels lonely, and it feels like that's not true, but it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you convey that so beautifully, you know, in the novel, like especially with Clyde's character. I loved Clyde. I felt so just drawn to him from the very beginning and was really rooting for them. And I just like the real devotion and acceptance and like just real love that Clyde feels toward Owen was
Yeah.
so moving. And you know, I like as you're talking about, you know, like showing ourselves and, you know, not hiding away, it makes me think about just kind of the whole of your book and how there are certainly real threats, you know, and real physical harm and emotional harm that is done in the book. But I do emerge from it feeling a sense of like there's more good than bad. Like there are more good people out there who are willing to, you know, grow and see something that stuns them, you know, like a bird in a chest, and feel like that this is fascinating, tell me more, or you know, hello Gail, nice to meet you. Like, you know, there's so much more of that in the world that you've created, and I really appreciated both the acknowledgement of true threats and also the outlook that there is so much good out there and there are so many kind, loving people in the world. And then also I loved that you made Owen so powerful. Like you gave a spoiler about the party, so now I'm just like I'm just giving spoilers all over. But you know, I love that he learned to fight and like he learned to punch and he was able to protect himself. And I just the whole like just that all of these things can be true, which they are, was just I was very moved by it. I thought that it was really
Thank you. Yeah, I mean that was important for me when I set out to write the book, and I mean most of my work tries to sort of address that.
Mhm.
Currently, anyways. I think that, you know, for a long time I was raised in the 90s, and times were different. I was also raised in like an evangelical conservative church,
Okay,
and
wow.
so you know it was wild.
Yeah.
And I just like the messaging, especially back then, was life will be terrible. No, it will not be worth living. You know, that a queer trans person cannot live a good life. And then, you know, I fought against that and
Yeah.
eventually came out. And as I came out, I found that was the opposite was so true. Like I was like, oh, fuck this noise. Life is better on the other side. There is more joy. There's more happiness. Like, why? I mean, I know why, right? It's about fear. It's about keeping people in the closet. And so I really want, you know, this book in particular, I was really concerned with like telling the truth, being honest, being real about those real life threats.
Yeah.
About, you know, the physical violence we can face. I mean, the like not even touching on the notion of like the you know the legal the laws that are being considered right now in a lot of legislators
Yeah.
state legislations, I wanted to make sure that was in there, that, you know, the Army acronyms is a real thing.
Yeah.
It's a real danger. But like at the center of this book is queer joy, and queer magic, because I think that that's the point. I don't think, I mean, I think that we can't ignore the thieves of joy, the Army acronyms, or what you want to call them, but that's not the point. They're not the point. They don't get to dictate every aspect of our lives. They may legislate against us, but we will always find ways to exist. We always have. And so that was really at the center of this, was like that queer joy. And that's what I wanted to capture, because it is just a really kick-ass life to be a queer woman living in 2023. It's dope as hell. Like, everyone should do it.
Yes. I highly agree.
Highly recommend. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I'm curious about, you know, I mean, hearing a little bit about your background and growing up, and also hearing that it took you 7 years to write this story. I'm curious to know, like, just kind of how the story came to be. I mean, did you start with the concept of the bird with the boy in his chest, or did you start with a concept of like an outsider or a person who feels, you know, different, and then figure out how to turn that into an allegorical tale? Like, tell us a little bit about the origin.
Yeah, I started this when I was at my MFA in Oakland. I had brought another novel and was like working on it, was convinced it was going to be my thesis and I would publish it as soon as I graduated, and that was my life. And like within, you know, a month or two at Mills, I had started this short story about a boy who had a bird in his chest, and it was just, you know, I finished it and sent it off, and it won an award, and it was published in a magazine. And then I tried to return to the old novel, and it just wasn't singing to me like it used to. And so I, you know, kept coming back to this story, and there were some other characters that were starting to emerge, and it was provided, you know, a nice little crisis. As I'm sure many authors can relate to, when you think you want to finish this one book, but another one is starting to show up. And yeah, it just like wouldn't really leave me alone. And I knew I had already decided, because I was moving away from this other book, that I really wanted to like sit in the space of like classic coming to age years of like 15 to 17, 18, like those when we're coming into ourselves and our sexuality and our identities, and are starting to really understand ourselves for the first time as like autonomous people. And I was really interested in writing about that time, and here was this character who had a bird who was really fun. And it just really like, it was a fun story to write. Like it really kept calling to me. And so at the recommendation of all of my cohort and my thesis director and everyone, I started writing this story instead. Yeah, and I knew, you know, I think in many ways I'm like, I mean, the book was like laid out in front of me. It just took me forever to get to it. It's my first book. I made a lot of false starts. I made a lot of mistakes I hopefully won't make again. Just with like how to just draft a novel like this. But yeah, I mean, for me, like everything makes sense, or once you come up with this notion that this boy has a bird who lives inside of him, and he has to keep her a secret.
Yeah.
And he also is trying to live life as a high schooler. Yeah. Does that answer?
It
a
does.
question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. It's so funny because, I also went to Mills for grad school, and I also entered with a novel
Really?
that I thought I was going to write.
Oh my God.
And then, and I also changed course. So funny. I was there from 2004 to 2006. When were you
Okay.
there?
A couple years before me, I was 2011 to 2013.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's lovely. I didn't know that.
the trajectory is very
Yeah.
familiar.
There's a lot of I feel like Mills MFA alum is so underrated.
Yeah.
When I signed with my previous agent, she was like, "Oh, you went to Mills." She was like, "My boss has this theory that Mills is the secret Iowa, where they
Oh,
turn out
wow.
all these great writers, but no one associates all the great writers with Mills."
Yeah, that's so
That's
interesting.
an interesting theory.
It is. I'm
Yeah,
so sad that it is no longer.
I know.
Yeah,
R.I.P.
I know. I enjoyed my time.
Same.
Yeah. So, let's talk about Gail. I love
Happily.
Gail. So I loved her so much. And I went into the novel with an assumption that Gail was going to be just like a metaphor or a symbol, And then I'm
Mhm.
like, wait, you are your own character. And I kind of imagined that queerness would be explored just through the bird in the chest. And then I was like, no, queerness is on the page.
Yeah.
We're looking at all sorts of elements of being queer and of, discovering your own sexuality and your own identity and just the beautiful and messy freedom of self-discovery. And so, I mean, first of all, Gail is hilarious. She's so wise. When you read the very beginning, it made me just love her so much because she's both the bird who is going to give you tips on how to hitchhike, and she's also just so trusting and nurturing of Owen. And so I wonder really anything you want to tell us about Gail, whether you consider Gail to be both a symbol and a character, or and also how the character of Gail evolved over your writing of this novel. Was she always the chatty, lovely character that she is now, or did you have other earlier thoughts about what she would be like?
Yeah, I think first of all, I was really nervous, and sort of one of my concerns was that people would think she was an allegory. And I brought, you bring these early pages to MFA workshops and things, and people are like, "Oh, so she's his conscience. She's, and I'm like, no, he has his own conscience. That's not she's just a bird who lives inside of him." And I think, she was pretty funny and pretty much herself right from the get-go. But I think I leaned into it at a certain point because I was like, I want it to be so clear that she is not a stand-in for something else, that she is wholly herself. And I also thought it would be really fun if she was a constant. She's everywhere Owen is. And so I was like, I have to keep it interesting. I have to keep her, she has to grow in some way. We have to understand her wants and desires, because this book is about, two characters really living side by side or one inside the other. She's present for all things. There's moments where she goes quiet and she stops speaking and things. But for the most part, she's there all the time. And so she should grow alongside Owen. She should change her mind. She should fuck up. That was important. And I think, to speak to the notion of queerness, I think that, it was also important for me to put the queerness on the page and to not do this sort of allegory. Particularly at the time I was writing it, I was like, queer people were out, we have more representation. Even when I started this in 2013, I was like, it's not like it was in the 90s. But I do think that through that the feeling I was really capturing in this book was the feeling of maybe what I felt growing up in the 90s, of this where we didn't have representation. People have also likened it to like a trans identity metaphor, which maybe I could see too.
Yeah.
Everyone is allowed to their interpretation and opinion of my book. But yeah, I think, this feeling of, wow, I feel different. I feel like maybe there are others like me, but I can't confirm or deny that without being vulnerable with myself and putting myself directly in harm's way. And so maybe I'll go a long time with never sharing this feeling, or maybe I'll start to test the waters and see if it's safe to say that I feel this way or have this thing inside of me. And maybe people will embrace that. Maybe I'll find someone else who also feels this way. And so I think that, the book takes place in 2010 through 2014, really. But I'm writing about this feeling that I felt in 1996 and 97,
Yeah. One thing that I loved, I think talking about the dates is making me move to the music in the book that you bring in. And I love it so much. And I was thinking, like, a few months ago, I had this experience of being somewhere and the Dirty Projectors came on. And I was like, I forgot about them. Like, one of the great sorrows of my life is letting go of CDs because, like there is, I don't know if you still have a lot, like we have records, but only, a small collection. Whereas I had this vast CD collection and I would go through. And so I would remember music and it would stay so present. And now I feel like everything digital is just also ethereal. And so, I was reminded of the Dirty Projectors. I listened to them. I was just like full of, the joy of rediscovery. And so I just, and then when I found them in your book, among all of the other great musicians that you include, it made me happy to see it and to remember, all of those different sounds and songs and the feeling. And I think that is also like a real coming of age teen experience that we get to kind of continue throughout our life. But for me, at least, the intensity of discovering new music has never been matched to when I was a teenager discovering this new music. And so, can you tell us about how you chose those musicians and what role music plays in your own life?
Yeah, happily. Music played a huge role in my life. I played in punk bands all through high school, and we played, venues similar to the Fort in the book. And music played a huge role. I think that music really provided like a community for me, as a like queer punk kid in 2000. It really provided a space and a group of people who, and by that time we were living in Salem, Oregon, which is a much smaller town than Portland. And there's not a lot to do. And so we were just putting shows on every weekend, and it was a really important part of my life. I felt less alone because of music. I felt like I understood myself because of the music I listened to. It's, I think, so important for a lot of people, and it was definitely important for me. So I was like, well, of course he's gonna, especially like you come from your mother's house, and she has her own taste in music. She listens to Talking Heads and David Bowie, and they listen to music together, but it's not the same as when he moves in with his 17-year-old cousin, and she's able to pass along Sleater-Kinney and Radiohead and Dirty Projectors and all these bands. And so that was really fun for me. I set sort of like rules and parameters. I was like, okay, it's got to be, the music I talk about has to make sense for like the time that they're in. And it has to be, I tried to figure out like what a teenager in 2010 would actually listen to, is like, even if it was considered classic or older at that point. Right. And I tried not to use too much of the music I really liked in high school, although I did include quite a bit. And yeah, I think that, I've always built a playlist for whatever I'm working on. And the one for this book was so long, much longer. I mean, it was, I think, 300 songs or something
Oh,
like that. I
wow.
would put on just like, and I like deep dive. Like, I also don't have CDs. I have some records and things, but
Yeah.
I would sort of like, I would find a band and be like, oh my God, I haven't listened to them in forever. And they did not go in the book, but like bands like, oh my God, I was obsessed with Weezer for 2 months. Like, what
Yeah.
a phase that was. And then through Weezer, I was like, oh yeah, what about the Rentals and That Dog? And like, I would go to Wikipedia pages and like look at bands that like members were in and other bands that they had been in. And it ended up building this like spider web of music that was like,
So
from
cool.
like mid 90s through 2014. And then I really, I sort of like picked the bands that I thought would be really like, evoke the most emotion for Owen for what he's experiencing. And also for Pacific Northwest. I was like, that would be, I used to get so excited when I came across a band that like thrilled me. And it turned out they were from Portland, Seattle or Boise or something. And so I was like, he would be excited about that too. I did, if anyone listening is interested, I did put together a playlist. And it's on my Instagram and my links if you go there. It's like 15 songs, and I even wrote like an annotated. I don't know where that is. At some point, my publisher sent out like an annotated song list and stuff.
Oh, cool. Yeah. That's awesome. Oh, fun. Okay, well, do you listen to music when you actually write? I wanted to hear a little bit about your writing process. So that could be the first question. Tell us how you work. I'm always fascinated to know.
I don't listen to music while I write. If I'm working on like, I do like some freelance copywriting stuff for like companies and things. And I do like screenplay script work, and that stuff I can listen to music in the background and do just fine. But when I'm writing fiction or even like an essay, I really just like silence. Sometimes if I'm like redrafting something, I'll put on, like those like, lo-fi beat type playlists. But really, I just like, I'm kooky and I read every single line out loud as I write it and things. And so I just like silence, which is weird, probably, but that's how I work.
Do you write in order or do you jump around when you're drafting?
So like my very first draft, I write out of order, typically because I don't know what I'm writing right away. And so I just have these short scenes or images or things that I'm exploring. And then I sort of get to a place to where I have this sort of draft. I think of it, Andy Greer calls it, filling out a crossword puzzle. And so I think of it like that, like, okay, I know these answers. And as I fill in the answers, I get more clues to the other answers around them. Okay. And then I have eventually a whole picture, hopefully. Once I have a whole picture, I usually sit down when I'm close to the end and kind of map out what I have left. Like, okay, I need these scenes need to be laced together. And then I print it up and make my notes. And I don't do any rewriting at that point. While I'm drafting the first draft, I just get it on the page.
Yeah.
So names change, tense changes, point of view changes, where they are changes sometimes. Like I just like will be like, whatever, I'm moving on. That scene is done. I wrote it. I'm moving on. And then I'll sit down. I'll take notes, and I'll rewrite the whole thing from front, starting at the front to the back. And then after that, I feel like I have like a book, and I'll start to like revise and rewrite what I need to. And yeah.
Yeah, that's so much like my own process. It's cool to listen to you talk that way.
You know what's funny is everyone, I feel like I don't know a single author who writes any other way.
Oh, really?
I know a couple who like outline, but like for the most part, I don't know anyone who does it other ways.
I have a couple close writer friends who just start at the beginning and write all the way through. And I'm always like, how do you know how do you know what you're doing or where you're going? And how can you stay engaged? Because for me, it's so much of a slog. Like if I try to do that, I have to just like go where the energy is and what I'm, feeling.
Yeah, I feel like writing is about exploring, especially in a first draft. And so I need room. Like I don't want a roadmap as soon as I sit down. I want to walk around and see what's interesting to me and what isn't as interesting as I thought it would be. And hi Cassie.
Hi. Craft questions are my favorite, so I was having a really good time. We've asked authors those questions before, and people have all different answers. It's wild. Like it's like that scene, I don't remember what show it is, but where he has like the map and the red string up on the wall and like name, I don't know. Okay, so I have a few audience questions. First and foremost, I want to say that everybody is very, very psyched about the playlist.
That's so great. Okay, you know what I'll do is so the link is on my stories, or not my stories, my links in my bio on Instagram. I'll post after this I'll post the annotated song list for everyone on my stories.
Amazing.
Yeah.
We'll repost, if you tag us, we'll repost it to Novel Neighbors.
Okay,
so we'll be able to find it wherever they so choose.
Perfect.
We have a question, and it says, one of my favorite lines is when Owen talks about music cracking him open. I related to that idea so much. What cracks you open?
Aw. So many. I'll try not to get weepy when I think about these songs. So actually the Dirty Projectors cracked me open, like in a huge bit of Orca, that first album of theirs. And those scents really, they blow me away. Lately, like honestly, the Four on Blondes, What's Up, has been cracking me open in this way that like it maybe hasn't in the past. I think particularly like the situation in the US and the way I've been feeling, it's just been a really poignant song. I have a whole playlist of songs that crack me open. Brittany Howard's Short and Sweet, wreck me every time. Yeah.
Nina, do you have one?
Gosh, I love Anything by Adrienne Lenker so much, and that one always, it always just gets me right in the heart.
Aww. We have another question for both authors. This is a very weepy discussion, so sorry. What was the first book that ever made you cry?
Oh.
And no, I'm a big fan.
I don't know if it's the first book that ever made me cry necessarily, but when I was 14, I read Slaughterhouse-Five, and it just like, I mean, I'm sure I cried while I read it because it's a book, an emotional book for me. But it just like really changed how I saw writing and how I saw the world. And then I think, it was not, I read it 15 years ago, so it wasn't the first book that made me cry, but a book that really influenced Boy, and is one that I've reread probably a dozen times and always makes me cry in the best way, is Tom Spanbauer's Now Is the Hour. It's a great story about a boy growing up in a rural town in Idaho. It's like coming of age, but 70s. And I mean, Spanbauer is just so fantastic. Yeah.
For some reason, I really like, I was trying to think about childhood and where the red fern grows.
Yes.
I haven't thought of it in so many years,
oh my God.
Yeah, that was quite the heartbreaker.
Yeah, no one asked me, but it was definitely Bridge to Terabithia.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, of
yeah.
course.
Way too young and in class
Yeah.
with people.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think I was a weepy mess after we read The Giver too, if you remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every
question-
book makes me cry.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For both of you, which authors inspire you and your work the most?
Do you want to go first?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. I Virginia Woolf is an author who I keep coming back to. I like she's one of the authors, like, for the first, like, when I read her, I feel like she just captures these like moments in life that are not generally talked about, like these feelings or these like places, like just the when we're kind of like in between or searching or whatever, and like something like I've just like had the feeling when reading her work that's like, oh my gosh, like I never knew that anybody else had the same feeling that I had. And so I go back to her for sure. Um, and I mean, gosh, there's so many, and like, many of them change, and I cycle through them and stuff. So I'll leave it there and let Em respond first.
Yeah, I mean Virginia Woolf for me too. I mean To the Lighthouse like changed my writing for the better, and I reread it every few years because it's just so incredible. I think Clarice Lispector, although I don't write like her, I don't think. She's been one of the most impactful writers for me. As I mentioned, Tom Spanbauer. Yeah, God, so many. I think right now, for the book I've been working on right now, I keep going back to Lainey Zumas's Red Clocks, which I think is like such a good portrayal of how life ticks on under like damning, fucked up, state or in this case national legislation. Yeah, I mean, I could sit here and just go on for hours. Casey Plett, Tori Peters. Yeah.
I love all of their works. And Red Clocks was the first book I picked up when Roe was overturned.
Yeah. I think, I mean, she must have sold 1 billion copies that week.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was very prescient. If both of you could write in a genre other than the one that you currently do, what would it be?
Is there a genre you don't write in, Nina? What's left for you?
I write for all ages now, sure. But I've never written a fantasy novel. Yeah. I've never written. Okay. I think, I would love to be able to write like a really good mystery, like, or like suspense thriller or something. I don't know. Like, maybe I will someday. I don't see it as like an impossibility for me, but it still feels out of my reach at the moment. How about you, Em?
Yeah, I mean, definitely like suspense thriller has been one, or like a whodunit would be so much fun to figure out how those work. Yeah, I think also, I mean, just it would be so much fun. And who knows, maybe someday I'll feel the freedom to write it. But to write like a deep like science fiction, like here's some aliens, they're in a spaceship, they're coming to the that's always I was just absolutely obsessed with aliens as a kid. And I just like sci-fi was really like my first weird book love. Yeah. And so I would love to write like just a deep sci-fi, cheesy, so much fun. Yeah.
I'll read that so hard. So this is in all honesty my question, and then I'll ask the last audience question. I was just wondering as you guys were speaking, this book has a main character who is younger and is going through like all of the big emotions of kind of being a teenager and a kid, and like you see him through a large portion of his young adult life. And Nina, you've written in both the adult and the young adult space. Why was this a story that you chose to tell as an adult novel, or in the adult literary fiction category?
Yeah, that wasn't really my decision.
Yeah.
I mean, I wrote the book that I wanted to write. I addressed the things I wanted to address. Everything I put in the book that was what people would call adult themes are things I experienced when I was 15. Suicidal ideation, sex, drugs, all these things I experienced as a teenager. And I wrote in the voice that I wrote it in. And the idea, I mean, and Nina, you might be able to speak to this too, but the notion that it's not YA was made, that was determined by my publicity team and my editor and my agent and all of them talking. That's not really something. I didn't set out to write an adult literary novel or a YA novel. I just set out to write the book that I wanted to write.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
It's so interesting how much is marketing and just like strategy, because there's so many books that could be published either way. And I know in the UK too, there are a lot of books that are published both like with different covers, like a teen cover and an adult cover, and then just like placed in both sections, and people can find, more people can find them, which I think is lovely too. But I feel like sometimes books are clearly one thing or another, and sometimes they can exist in a lot of places. Like I'm sure a ton of teenagers will find your book and love it.
I get messages from 14, 15-year-olds all the time who read my book. And also I get introduced as a YA author sometimes.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I don't know.
No,
whatever you guys think.
I've always just wondered, and that's so interesting as like a craft versus like the other sides of the book world. Oh, that's awesome. Okay, last question from the audience, and then we have like a few Novel Neighbor rapid ones, and then we'll let you both go. Last audience question is, what is your favorite type of scene to write? So like action, dialogue, etc.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I think like party scenes are really, they're so much fun. I mean, there's a lot of them in this book. There's a couple of them, and like a couple like concert scenes and things. I don't know. I like to write. Like for me, the most fun scenes to write are the ones where my characters are having a good time. Cool. Sex scenes are really fun for the same reason. Sex scenes, party scenes, like driving around screaming at the top of your lungs to some music in the car scenes. Like those are like those scenes where I get to sort of try to capture like unbridled joy are really the most fun for me.
My answer is the complete opposite. I love the like quiet, like reflective, kind of like solitary scenes. I think it's because I get overwhelmed by all the moving parts of the bigger ensemble scenes. Like sometimes when they click, I love it and it's amazing. But sometimes I just feel like it's like too many parts for me to handle or something. I struggle with them at times. So I like it when it's like super simple and there's like something out the window and my character is alone with her thoughts.
The mess up thing is I also like the quiet scenes. They're all fun, and then also dialogue is really hard sometimes. And it's like it just really, for me, there's like, it's not necessarily the type of scene, but like some scenes are just more difficult than others, and others just seem to come easily.
For sure.
So those are the ones I like, are the ones that come easily.
Totally the easy ones.
Well, good. It sounds like you both like to write.
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay, a few rapid fire questions, and then we're out. What is both of your personal favorite season, time of year?
Oh.
I'm gonna say like late spring late summer, early fall. Like those two spaces, the space on like either side of summer.
Yeah. I was actually thinking something very similar. I like the first like hot day. Like I love that. Like when it's still a novelty and it's like the sun. Oh, I remember this. Like, yes.
You pull out shorts for the first time, or like a dress with no tights.
Yes. Yeah. So great.
What do you order at a coffee shop?
Cappuccino.
Oh no, cappuccino.
Ooh. What's your favorite meal to cook?
We've been having. Oh, you go ahead, Em.
Did you say meal to cook?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And if you don't cook, that's fine. What do you order yourself?
We've been having like a sort of like veggie rice bowl situation with like good like seaweed toppings and stuff like that at home, which has been a big hit. So that's our current favorite.
Yeah, I mean, mine changes a lot depending on what I'm into. I really like to cook. I worked in restaurants for a long time, and I love to cook it up. But like one of my go-to favorites has been this like miso butter chicken that I've been making. That's like really, it takes like 20 minutes, and it's like this miso butter paste I rub the chicken with, and yeah, that and some rice and like, you know, sauteed veggies or something has been my go-to lately.
Sounds delicious.
Can you drop that recipe along with the
I know.
Yeah, I have the photos, screenshots I took of the New York Times cooking recipe that I'll send everyone. So you get around the paywall.
Get around the paywall. Okay, last question. What are you both reading right now?
Well, besides Em's gorgeous book, which I loved so much, I also just read They're Going to Love You by Meg Howry, which I found really beautiful too and made me sob. It's almost brand new. I think it's just been out for a month or two.
Lovely. Yeah. I spent the weekend rereading Nina's Yoga Buena, which is such a beautiful novel. I love it so much. It was really nice to just, you can read it in a day or two. just breeze through it. So lovely. And I feel like it touches on a lot of the things that my work touches on too, with like career joy and chosen family and building a life for yourself. Yes.
Yeah.
And then I'm also reading Gail Jones's The Healing, which is a wild ride. A romp, as they say.
Cassie, what are you reading?
Ooh, I am reading The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez, which is like a wild fantasy that is told in first, second, and third person. And it's like very, very cool. It's like happening on a stage way in the future or in the past. I don't know. It's very cool. I'm loving it.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We had a blast.
Thank you so much for having me, Nina. Thank you so much for being here. It's just been such a dream and a pleasure to have you ask me questions about the book.
Oh, thank you. I had so many more questions we didn't get to because your book is that good. So if anyone hasn't read it yet, I hope you buy it from the Novel Neighbor and read it. You're in for a treat.
We have copies of both, and we're very excited. So we will talk to y'all soon. Have a good evening. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Everybody is saying how lovely and inspiring this discussion was. So, again, thanks so much, and we'll see y'all soon.